All right. Yeah, I have some technical issues here. So let's start. We will cover today a number of topics. The first one is modules and the semantic versioning. So you're probably familiar with semantic versioning of modules, where you have major, minor, and kind of a patch version for modules, right? So can anyone explain to me what's the idea behind this? So why I have Go version 1.11.1, for example? Yeah. Yeah. And what does it mean? Yeah.
It's to easier distinguish how much has changed. Like patch versions, like typically just we fixed some stuff,
Yeah.
made sure it's more robust, and minor is like we added this small functionality and stuff, and then major is like, oh, we changed so much recently that.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. So let's say I have a library and I have a function 1, function 2, and function 3. And then my function 3 was not correctly working, was not doing what it's supposed to do. And I released this, and I said it's version 1.0.0. And then function 3 was, not quite right, and I patched it, and I fixed it. So then I will release version 1, okay? And then if I change something in those 3 functions, and they do the same thing as they're supposed to be doing, then I change it to 2, okay? And then I have some feature requests, and I've added function 4 and function 5 to my public API. So this is a public API that I'm exposing to my library or to my product. Then what I do? If this was version 1.0.2, and now I've added those 2 functions, what should I do?
It's a bit up to you actually, but I would up the API to 1.1.0.
That's correct. Usually we make a distinction between having this functionality and not having it by bumping up the minor version of our product, right? So now I would say I have 1.1.0, okay? Because there is kind of a difference between the functionality with those functions and without, right? I could say 1.0.3, but that would kind of be a bit misleading because the difference between O2 and O3 is quite substantial. There is a lack of functionality, okay? So when should you bump the major one? Yep.
If you introduce breaking changes, let's say function 1 requires additional input to work correctly.
Yeah.
To fix it, you'll have to add additional parameters to function 1, and you should bump the version major as well because you have made breaking changes to your API.
Very good. So any breaking changes, let's say function 1 was not taking any parameters, and in new version it needs something. It needs a password, or it needs a parameter, which means all the code which is calling F1 without any parameters will be now broken. It will not compile because F1 takes a parameter. It takes some string or something, right? So breaking changes means I have to bump the major version up. So then if I did that, I would have to release 2.0.2, 0.0, okay? If I removed a function, I also have to bump the version because it means all the old code which relies on F1 being there is gone. I mean, F1 is gone. Yeah?
There is also one additional caveat that one should consider. If there is a bug in method in the API where you actually know that somebody is relying on that bug, you should also bump your version to let them know that that bug is gone.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so this is kind of relatively straightforward, okay? Can I, for example, let's say F2 takes no parameters. and it does something, and I changed what it does. So it was doing one thing, and now I'm changing it to do something else. Can I do that? Okay, let's postpone that question. Once I've done it, what should I do to my versions?
You've done a regular change.
That's right. So I should bump their major number up, right? Okay, so if you ever done that, you have to bump that version up. But should you do that? Should you change the behavior of F2? No, you shouldn't. Okay? What you should do is you should implement something like F2 0 and mark this one as deprecated, and then this one will become kind of a new function which is there, and this one in some versions you will remove. Okay? So you should not change what's already there, because then you, first of all, breaking the contract that the API is making with everybody, that F2 always does the same thing. Okay? But the normal versioning systems don't prevent developers doing that. Have you had situations like that happen to you? That library maintainer or developer changed the behavior of the function without changing the signature, bump the version up, sometimes not even the major, and then your code compiled, but it was not working correctly. It happened to me multiple times, and that's something regrettable. Like, that should never happen. So you should remember that once you publish something and make some public name or public API, it should always do the same thing. You don't change the behavior. So you can use the deprecation and introduction of new functionality and kind of removal of it, in the next major version. Usually, what the typical pattern is, you keep something deprecated until the following major release is happening, right? So you keep it around until the next major release is done, and then the deprecated stuff is removed. Some packages keep the deprecated stuff for longer. It depends on your user base and so on and so forth. All right, so this is more or less semantic versioning. And normally, semantic versioning allows people to change their behavior with just bumping the version number. So how Go dependencies work at the moment? You have the URL to a package, which is in a Git repository. So let's say you have some library A that you depend on, and then you say go get, and you get the dependency into your Go path, and then you build your own module. So let's say this is a library A that you depend on, and this is your code. And let's say your code is version 1.0.0, and this library is also 1.0.0. Okay. Let's say the maintainer of lib A made a new version, right? So there is a new version 1.1.0 with some new features, and then you may or may not need to change your stuff because it's not supposed to change the original contract, right? So if you do go get update, it will update your dependency and your code will still compile and it works, okay? What happens if you have 2.0.2 release and it does introduce something that kind of breaks your code and you have to release new version? Well, you release new version, right? But when you say go get update, your code will not compile, okay? Because your code is still version 1, and this one breaks your code. So if someone says, get me this dependency from the Git repo, then you have a bit of a problem because they will get the latest version, and then you will have the latest version of this and the latest version of this, and they don't work yet, right? But if you release the version, let's say 1.1, which works with 2.0, then it will be fine again, okay? So for some simple use cases, you may have a bit of a hiccup, and then if the developer if it's you, then you can fix it. But if it's someone else, let's say you have another library, library B, that is also initially 1.0.0, and then your code depends on both. And then let's say version 2 breaks your stuff, you've updated it, but then let's say this library releases version 1.1, which is not compatible with version 2 of the other library, right? So you get to a situation where you cannot really build your stuff, because to build your code, you need version 2 of library A, and you need version 1 of library B, but version 1 is the old one, the latest one is this one, which is incompatible with the other library. So you get into the dependency nightmare, okay? So you try to, somebody loads your stuff, tries to get all the dependencies, and then it cannot really do that, right? So what do we do in that case? Well, we have to mark the exact version of what the code should be built with, right? So let's say this app is called app, and you say app, it's currently version 1.1.0, and it has dependencies, and it depends on library A, which is version, let's say 1.1.0, it's before the problem happened, and library B, which is version 1.0.0. And then if someone gets this specification, they can get those libraries and compile it, right? What we usually do, we say at least this version,